So we make sure we get this on recording for folks who are online. All right. Well, I was explaining to the folks who got here a couple minutes early. So Kat and Jeff, you didn't hear this. I've been in a training workshop all day today, basically from 8:30 to 4:30, and so I wasn't sure I could get home, but then my internet completely went off. So I am working from the office, and I'm hoping that we will not be here the whole 2 hours tonight, just because I'm exhausted and I am not liking to leave after dark the campus. So that is where we are. So I'm going to get us started right away, get us going into the information tonight. I always like to start off the class with going over the previous week's assignments to see if there's anything I want to give feedback on, as well as looking forward to the current week's assignments. And I spend the first part of class doing that. And then I spend the second part of class, and good to see you, Dr. Rice. Dr. Rice. And I spend the second part of class actually going over some highlights from the chapters, but my readings are at home, so we're going to do that a little loosely tonight. And good to see everybody. So it was fun to actually look at your videos, watch your videos, and to get to know you a little bit. I felt like that I could see the people that didn't show up last Thursday night, but also remembering those of you who did show up. And so it's we're going to be doing that for the next few discussion boards, just so that you can discussion posts, so that you can be able to have information on each other and get to know each other a little bit better. So I think everybody except for the one person who didn't respond to but one post, and they just joined the class like Tuesday, so they may still get some other post in for the discussion boards. But everybody got a 9 or 10 on the discussion boards, except unless you didn't post and respond. And let me just tell you the difference between the 9s and the 10s. I was really looking for, and I will continue looking for, you all, you know, providing some information that shows me that you have done the readings. And so I'm really wanting the people that got 10s are the ones that basically tied something in their post or their reflections and responses to the readings and told me where it came from. So I know a lot of you, when I was looking at the and making notes about kind of the commonalities, a lot of you talked about listening, feeling heard, patience. I wrote down some of these: respecting other people, the power of conflict, even to help our relationships grow better, not overreacting, having that kind of emotional control, and talking things through, not avoiding, not waiting to talk things through. And those are some things that I kind of saw as I was looking at this. Valuing the humility, and being proactive. And so some of you used in your own post, you used, I think one or two people did actually use the book in their own post, but most people didn't do it there. But when they did do it, that in order to get some of the full points, you had to do it fully in all of the responses. And so in the future, I'd like for you, both in your own post and in your reply backs to other people, pull in concepts and tell where you got them from. You don't have to use the full-blown citations. You could just say in chapter 2 of the interpersonal conflict book, or in the transforming conflict video that we watched which is one of the things that you'll be watching for this week. I'll be showing a little piece of it tonight. Along with the Uri text, I saw this. Okay, so just refer to where you found it, where you saw it. You don't have to give page numbers. I'm not looking for that kind of detail, but for the most part, people were right on track with the kind of thing I was wanting them to post. You were within that time limit of the post of 3 to 5 minutes. So I was kind of guessing, because it's the first time I've taught this class, to see if you could do it in 3 to 5 minutes. And some of you were right at that 5, and some of you were more at the 3, but you got it in. And you were really doing thoughtful responses across the board to each other, tying in your own experiences, making some comment about what they said. So I could tell that you were thoughtful and thinking about it. And I really liked that, especially those responses that came in later, like yesterday, that you were looking at to see who had not gotten responses yet. So the only person that has not gotten a response yet, I think, is Ben Rollins. And so if any of you want to just go in and I'm not going to look to see if you've done that, but Ben just added the class Tuesday night, so you might want to give him just some love a little bit. If some of you want to just reply back to him, you could do that. So I think Jeff Ben was in the class with us, the Listening and Civil Dialogue class, I think. You may not remember him, but I think he was. He was from Kentucky or someplace out east. So Jeff, I don't know if you remember that or not, but I knew him from that when I saw his name come across. So, but we have some great folks in the class. Think if you look at, think about their backgrounds. I mean, all the way from coaching and sports to working in disabilities with disabilities to working with the social work field to working in communication to being retired but looking for a new kind of position to teaching. So I'm looking forward to how you're going to bring in your own experiences throughout to tie in to the course material. It's going to make it so much more interesting than just me giving examples. And we'll find your examples too coming into the recording. So I just wanted to say that. Kudos. I thought you all did a good job in terms of that. Just make sure, and Jeff, if you're listening to this, if you end up responding to more posts, then drop me an email and I'll reflect your grade accordingly. So, okay, so the work-based plan, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because we're moving forward to week 2, and I already had one person that's turned it in. I don't remember who it was yet. I haven't looked at that. But Tony, you sent me an email that was very thought-provoking yesterday, so I wanted to kind of talk through your experiences and see if there's anybody else that's actually tried to use that AI to help them with that work-based plan. And then we might, if we don't get enough kind of people have had experience, we might actually try it out together and with you all kind of helping me answer the questions. So tell us about your experience, Tony, and then we'll see if there's anybody else that's had the experience of already starting to do that work-based plan, initial AI generation work.
Yeah, so I've never before used any kind of AI or chat GPT or anything like that for utilizing, I mean, anything actually, not just schoolwork. But when I started with it, started, with basic communication, just trying to get it comfortable with typing and with getting eventually to voice. And then as I got to the point of where I started into the actual trying to actually do the project, I did things like, updated or added this course syllabus. So, and told it that I specifically wanted it to identify what the course had to say about AI policies and to understand that I don't want it to try to think for me. I just want it to assist me in a future job that I'm going for and what conflicts I may encounter, but to also pull it from the course description. I think it also used the goals
Mm-hmm.
and then also, copy and paste and put onto a separate document. You have to put them all onto your own documents, and then you can upload everything into it. And I use the actual assignment itself and told it what to focus on, so focusing on generating the 10 to 15 points, and then utilizing both kind of a raw, which was just the 15 points that it came up with, and then allowing the AI on a separate document to go in a little bit more detail as far as what it generated, and making sure to have the AI dictate within itself that it utilized itself in generating this document. And I found it to be very helpful and beneficial because it's although like I know all of those things about human resource as I'm reading them, I would not have thought about using all of those in one go. I may not have consciously thought, "Oh yeah, I need to put in about labor unions and things like that," but I know that that'd be a something I would encounter going into HR in various different states. Some have unions, some do not. Like Arkansas is an at-will state, and the it just it really made it easier because I was kind of daunted at what the assignment was asking for, but ChatGPT was able to analyze it.
Yeah, and Tony, you had to do it a little differently and kind of related to what Kat had said last time. You both are going to go for a new job, right? So you aren't even able to answer very many questions about that current job. And so unless you already know about it, so you found a job description that would be a job that you actually would like to apply for. You put that in there too. And
Yes.
yeah, so you had to have a
I,
little
uh,
more
I
creativity.
got the job description. My mother actually used to work at Walmart, and she knew a lady over, but you could find these job descriptions like on WebMD or anything like that. She just had a actual, from Walmart, what is the job description and area that I'm kind of going at. So I utilize that, and by putting that directly into ChatGPT along with the course syllabus and the assignment itself, it seemed to very easily be able to generate what your assignment was asking for. Now, going towards looking to a future job might be a little different because you may have to explain a little bit more what exactly it is you're looking for and what steps you're wanting it to take. Like, is this what steps do I need to take and have cleared before I try to get this job? Like by
Hmm.
going with job requirements
Hmm.
might be another way to go about it.
So one of the things that also is difficult with Tony, yours and Kat's kind of way of doing with this, and Caitlin, I could guess that you might choose a future job too. I mean, there may be others of you that are thinking about doing it this way as opposed to using a current job or a place where you volunteer or attend school. Um, so if that's true, I mean, another thing that you're going to have to be thinking about is when because it all you're asking to do is to eventually, I mean, is to create those 10 to 15 possible scenarios. Okay, now then you've got to go and think about which of those scenarios do you, without the use of AI, do you want to actually explore in terms of how it relates, how you can use the course material to improve your behaviors and your learning there. So one of the things to think about, and I'm going to share my screen here, and then we'll go back and see if other people have done this as well. But when you go into the work-based conflict plan, it might be helpful for you before, I mean, you're working on this part, right? That's due 8/31, the work-based conflict intervention plan. So just as a reminder, what basically you're doing, if you already have the current job, and the specific duties that you know that you do, or a specific area that you're volunteering in or your student role, okay, then you can ask it to pose 3 questions about your role, and you'll be able to truly answer those. And so most of you, I expected, would actually use this number 2 to train the AI on your job. Okay, but what I'm really talking about with Tony and Kat, when they're thinking about a new job that they'd like to apply for, it's harder to do that if you've never been in that job. But Kat, in your case, you have been in that job, just in the military sector, not in the private sector. And so you could say, ask me about my experiences in the military sector one at a time to gain an understanding of how I work with others in that role that I might need to improve on in the private sector. Okay, so you could do something like that if you wanted to. So eventually, I mean, what your goal is to use the AI up to this point to generate those 10 to 15 job specific tasks or situations where conflict management competencies could be demonstrated or analyzed. Um, and then by yourself, without the AI, you're going to choose the 5 tasks to focus on for observation, analytic reflections. And the reason I'm bringing this, kind of big picture here is it would be helpful as you're thinking about the choice of those and your kind of justification of that, because you've got to actually submit the prompts you use and then identify, explain why you chose the 5 you did to focus your reflection on this semester. So I've got to see what those 5 are in this work-based conflict intervention plan by the end of the week, okay, and your justification for them. But to be able to pick those, it might be helpful for you to see what you're going to have to do with them. Okay. So the entry number 1 is just, it's basically, they're all the same. Okay. So select one of the 5 work-based conflict intervention plan tasks you identified. Answer the following questions. You should not use AI. What part of the task creates intrapersonal, interpersonal, or group conflict? Now, intrapersonal is within yourself. Maybe 2 values of yours are being, you're having to deal with. Oh, freedom versus responsibility inside myself. Okay. Interpersonal is with another person. Group is with a team, right? So be thinking about, as you're looking at those 10 to 15, there's got to be if you're picking the 5, there's got to be at least a part of that task that has potential conflict in it. Okay. So how do you think in your past, and Tony, I would suggest, you're not just applying for an HR job out of the blue. You've had some past experiences that you would be able to apply that are transferable. Okay. So an example of how you've seen conflict happen with a similar task. Okay. Even if it's not exactly in that. And then which concepts that you read about in the last 2 weeks. So you're going to be using, because these are due every 2 weeks. Okay, basically, after we get this, you get the 5 approved, which I will do. Okay. So every 2 weeks after that, you're going to have an entry. So you're going to look back on those 2 weeks of reading and what concepts could help you deal with that. How do you think that they could help? And this time you are going to be using APA style to cite your sources so that I know that you've read and you're practicing kind of in-text citations. Then, what's one thing you'd like to implement in the future based on those concepts in that kind of situation? And you'll have to kind of think about what the actual situation might be. It's easier, again, if you use the actual job or a current position that you've had to kind of build as a foundation, even if you're going for a future job when you're answering these questions. Okay. Then you're going to put your implementation IT into a SMART goal by filling in the blanks. Okay. So I thought it would be helpful for you to see that, because that will help you, I think, choose, because some of those 10 to 15 ideas might not be related to conflict directly, or might not be related to any kind of situation that you've already experienced that you can bring in specifics from. Okay. Tony, I see a hand up, so let's answer that.
Yeah. So for example, like, since although I have knowledge about HR and going into it, I don't have specific examples for the conflict. Could I ask the HI to generate a conflict that could potentially be encountered, see if it has that within its
Okay,
situation
so I will tell you that
database?
once you start doing that, Tony, it is this far over the stepping of the line to have
Okay.
AI do it for you.
Okay. I just
Okay.
wanted to,
I
just
really
ask if
want
it
your
could
personal
generate that
voice.
conflict.
Now, could you talk
Okay.
to your mom who gave you that?
Yeah.
Tell you examples? Or talk to
Got
somebody
you.
that you know
Yes.
to do that kind of work? Absolutely. But I
Okay.
really want the AI to stop at this
Okay.
first part. And you're going to see the tension within you, right? It's going to be hard. And Tony, you talked about that in what you wrote me in your email. It's like you could see
Yes.
how easy it would be to fall into this trap of letting AI do everything. Okay. So I'm going to have to be able to see enough specificity for you to know some details. And you could even say, in talking to my mother who works in HR, she told me about a situation without details. Without the names, in which this and this happened. That reminded me of a time in which I had an experience similar to that. I would still like for you to try it, tie back
Got you.
somehow to your own kind of skill set. All right.
Absolutely.
Time in which I actually experienced this, maybe not in that same setting, but I experienced that. And then you can set some goals for yourself. Okay.
Okay.
For Tony and Kat, whenever you're doing this, you're going to have the harder this is going to be more difficult for you, I think. Okay. Especially for you, Tony. Kat, I think not as hard, because you're going to be able to refer back to your own experiences in the military, right?
Yes.
Um,
I did have
yeah.
a question too, because technically I'm still employed by the federal government and I did
Okay.
work for 5 to 6 months before I took the deferred resignation, and I did experience a lot of conflict. Did you want me to just go compare the military to the private sector route, or compare to where I was a civilian HR rep like actually hiring
Kat, either
civilians?
way, but I would like for this to be really practical for you so that you
Okay.
can be setting goals that you can work towards in the future. So that we're
Okay.
not just looking back on a past experience without any goal setting for the future. Now, I could say that, you could, let's just say that you have you're pulling from an experience, right? But you're not currently in that job, but you think you're going to have a similar kind of experience in the future. So the next time I encounter this situation in the future, I will improve my ability to do this by doing this. Okay. So
Yep.
you can go back and look at the past to create your goals for the future. In fact, all of us are going to have to go back and look at the past to create our goals for the future. We're all going to have to do that. Probably. Okay. And or asking somebody else who's been in that experience. Okay. If you've never, and I know, Tony, you're in a little bit different experience because of the current job situation you're in, but I would argue that even in your caretaking responsibilities, you have had some experiences that are gonna be, because you've had experiences with doctors, with other medical professionals, with the system, insurance. Okay. So I'm thinking about, your caretaking, is your mom, I think you're taking care of? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was
So,
even when we had to appeal for her disability, and
yeah.
I mean, that was a conflict because
So,
we had to go before a
so
judge,
I
and
would argue that even as you talk about with your mom about the situation or with somebody else about HR, right? I mean, a lot of HR, in your situation, is dealing with benefits. Okay. So you might think about the tying of if even your experience back in your current experience, past, recent, with what you think you'll be having to do in the future. And again, for you two, it's a little bit different, right? I'm expecting Doc Rice to be talking about, teaching, right? And conflict that he has in the classroom or with colleagues. That's going to be easy. Jeff, you probably have conflict that you have with admissions and with future students or with parents. I mean, I don't know, or maybe a place you volunteer. And Caitlin, I can't imagine that you don't have any conflict in the Communication Skills Center, but you may not want to be focused on that. You may want to focus on a future. If you do, you're just going to have to do a little bit more creativity in terms of how you do that. So that's why I'm spending a little bit of time on that tonight. Okay. So first of all, at anything I've said so far, do you have questions about, and then we'll see if anybody else has tried the AI stuff yet.
I don't have a question, but I tried the AI and I don't know. I was about to pay for the $20 a month, Chat GPT thing, but I realized that there's also Gemini and
If you have
and
access to Gemini at your school, there is that. Claude has
yeah,
some free things.
yeah,
I heard somebody talk recently about Perplexity. I've not
yeah,
tried it. And then the one that comes with a Google account for your university is Google Notebook LM. Now, the Notebook LM part requires you to really put some stuff into it before it will talk to
yeah,
you. You got to feed it.
yeah,
Where ChatGPT will just answer a question
yeah,
with its already existing
yeah.
database. Yeah.
I tried it with Gemini, and all I had to do was log in with my ULR email, and it
Okay.
gave me some great results. So I wanted to share that with the
Okay.
class.
So Gemini might be another
Yeah,
possibility. Make sure that when you're putting it in, that you're not just taking the first thing it says. You're actually having a conversation with it. Now, I understand with some of these tools, you can literally have the conversation verbally. I always just do typing because I get a little freaked out when I'm like really feeling like I'm talking to the AI because it's like, okay, this is not real. Although I have had a friend of mine that told me, a colleague actually, that said she had so many interactions with the AI about things that she needed help with, personally and otherwise. She said, I want you to create a persona for me. And they did. And then she wanted the picture. Now that's a little weird to me, but it is what it is. And she showed us the picture, nice looking person. So anyway, you can do what you want, but don't use it to substitute for loneliness unless you just really have to. Okay. So, all right. Who else has tried this already? Kat, Caitlin, Jeff? Dr. Rice has? Tony, obviously. All right, would it be helpful tonight just to see what it looks like when you're doing it, to go through an example? Okay, so what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna just actually try one that I haven't tried before. So let's try Claude, okay? And I've not used Claude before, so we're gonna do this. I'm gonna accept it. How was my day, April? I'm gonna share my screen. I don't know. Anyway, so here's where I would actually initially upload the file, right? Okay. I don't know if it allows me, I do have the syllabus, so I'm going to go in and find my syllabus in here. So I'm going to upload this syllabus. All right. I am going to, let's see, I need for somebody in the chat, just for fun and giggles, to give me a job description. I don't care what the job description is. Somebody just put it in the chat. I'm going to cut and paste it into the here, okay? And I'm going to give it instructions. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to actually go into this work-based learning plan, and I'm going to tell it what I need it to do. All right. I'm just going to take the part that's supposed to be AI. I'm going to need your help as a thought partner on a part of a graduate. Okay, thanks, Kat. Just whenever you get it in, just I'll share it with it in just a minute. Thank you. Oh, I can't do Tony's either way, but it doesn't matter. Need your help as a thought partner on a part of a graduate assignment for my current conflict management class. I have attached the syllabus so you can see the goals of the class as well as the class rules for how I can use AI. Okay. I'm going to also, okay, we'll go with Tony's. All right, so let me download this. All right, download that. Okay, download, save. Okay. I'm going to also, so let me just upload that while I've got it. Upload a file under my downloads. Date, Walmart job ad. I've also uploaded a job description that will be used as the basis for this assignment, which I have described below. Now, sometimes if you hit return on these, it'll automatically start responding. So I have to almost like put it without any returns in it. I don't know Claude well enough. Okay. So, whether I can do that, I am to use customize, do that. I will follow the steps below. Okay, so I don't think I necessarily need this. Okay, I don't even know. I will want you to ask me 3 questions about this role, one at a time, to gain, I guess I could just type this, a better understanding of how I work with others in that role. After answering those 3 questions, I will need you to generate ten to 15 job specific tasks. Okay, if you want, take a screenshot of that. If that would help you, okay, so you know kind of what to put in as a initial prompt. All right, do I have it up long enough for you to do that?
Does it already have the actual specific assignments on the upload, or?
It does inside the syllabus.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know
Okay.
that was actually on the syllabus.
Let me see if I can call it the name of the assignment though, is the basis for this work-based plan assignment, which I have described, basis for the work-based, which is described in the syllabus, maybe. Briefly in the syllabus. We could
Yeah,
say what
I
page
used that, like I said,
on.
I copy and pasted the assignment, put it on a Word doc so that it had what
And
was
you,
specifically
yeah,
asked in
so
Blackboard.
Tony's put that in if you want to do that. So I'm going to do it without that and see what it does, but this is actually on page 2 of the syllabus, so I'm going to help it a little bit. Page 2. Okay. All right, we're just going to see what it gives us, okay? Click return. All right, now you guys are going to help me come up with the answer to this. To create a personalized plan, let me start with my first question. When you're working with store managers across multiple facilities who may have different leadership styles, what has been your biggest challenge in getting them to consistently implement HR policies and procedures? Can you describe a specific situation where you encountered resistance or conflicting perspectives about how something should be handled? Kat, we may have to rely on you for this unless there's other people that are in HR. What kinds of things can I put there?
I know as far as a conflicting leadership style, someone who is productivity oriented as opposed to someone who's oriented towards employee well-being and satisfaction. A productivity oriented manager would be only concerned with the bottom line. Somebody else would be concerned with employee development,
Okay, so I can kind of put
potentially.
that way. Um, I'm just going to make up some. Also, people are generally afraid of my HR department, so they typically don't report much to it because they are afraid of getting people fired unnecessarily and lawsuits. I'm making up stuff, okay?
Yes, I was going
That
to say
sounds about
too,
right.
when you say leadership styles, you could say someone who's authoritarian versus someone who's more democratic,
Okay, managers who are
or
more
servant leadership versus authoritarian.
authoritarian versus those who are more from a servant leader perspective. Okay, that's enough for right now. We're just going to see. Okay, it'll ask us another question. Gives me some kind of, all right. And we're going to make this next one shorter, but just for the sake of time, okay? Because I'm just going to show you what it gives me at the end, okay? This is just the process that you go through. So given these trust barriers, how do you typically discover when conflicts are brewing or escalating? People talk or people share all kinds of things with me. Because I'm a nice person. I don't know. I don't, however, have much authority to really change things as I'm new in the organization. Kat, anything else you want to add? What approaches have
That
you found most
sounds
effective?
that sounds absolutely correct on almost every job I've ever had the last 10 years in HR.
Sometimes I'll report it to my direct supervisor, and sometimes they will follow up, but most of the time they avoid conflict too. I don't know. Okay, we're just going to call it that. All right. Yeah, I am. I'm an information hub. All right. What types of pushback or resistance do you encounter most frequently? Do people challenge your suggestions, dismiss them, redirect blame? And this is where I sometimes will say they do all of that. Okay. Actually, I have seen managers do all of that, all of those things. But typically, because I'm new, I get dismissed. How's that? So you can write as much as you want, okay? Now, it's done your 3 questions. It knows it's supposed to be doing something. And in some cases, it'll actually, ChatGPT will actually put it in there for you. This, it looks like I've got to open it up. Again, I've not used Claude before, so we'll see if it looks like it's.
Yeah, when I asked ChatGPT if it can generate documents, it said that it did not have the capability to generate its own standalone document.
It does
It
if
could
you have the paid
only,
version.
yeah, I got the $20 a month version.
Yeah,
Yeah, the next one up does. Oh, okay.
yeah. Okay, so comprehensive learning plan with 15 specifics. I thought I had to click on that, but here we go. Context summary, giving me a lot more. 15 specific. Oh, it's tying. It's even labeling it and giving me where I should put it in the order. Okay, now I've got to pick 5, all right? But here they are. And then it tells you what you got to do. Select 5 of them. Tells you exactly what you got to do. It even tells you what possible theory connections you can explore. Now you can see how tempting it would be to let it do the next step. But no, that's all I want you to do. Okay? Unless there are not 5 things here you can do. But you pick the 5 that you would like to learn about, that you want to learn, that you want to apply things to. All right? So this is Claude. You can copy it, publish it. Here, let's see if I can publish and copy link acceptable to anyone on the internet. I don't really want that. If I copy this, I download as a PDF. Let's see if I save it, and then I could put it hypothetically into downloads. All right, let's see if I can. Okay, how do you add a, is it the file there? My computer. I've not tried this before. All right, so in case you want to see it, it's there. And I will, for those who are online, I'll put a PDF of that also into something that you can see that I'll add. Okay. All right. Did that help? So you got to pick 5 of them then. Tell me why you picked them. And then you don't have to tell me which order you're going to put them in, but you might kind of note yourself which order. I liked how Claude did it. Actually, it connected it with I didn't even ask it to connect it to potential weeks, but it did that. So ChatGPT did not do that. It doesn't. So might be. And I don't think I have I know I haven't paid anything for Claude. So, and I don't know how many limits there are to that, but anyway, might be something you use. So that's what for next week, that's what's due. I mean, for the end of this week, that's what's due on Sunday. Okay. Now, there is one other thing that's due on Sunday, and that is your next, well, 2 other things, but one other thing for you guys. The third thing is for the people who are not coming to class. So let's look at the next discussion post. Because that's also due on Sunday. And again, it's the same kind of setting. I mean, the same kind of timeline. You post it on Sunday by 11:59 p.m. and then you have until Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. And I try to send out a reminder on Wednesday. Don't forget to get it done, but I sometimes may not always do that. So let me just share my screen again so you can see the discussion. And I think I put all of them in now. So you can kind of see, you notice that every other week you're doing some feedback about your work-based plan entry. So is basically what every other week's going to be. All right, so this one, let's go to discussion week 2. 2 parts. Again, initial prompt this time, and I don't have my book with me. Actually, I might have the old book. No, it's the same one. 2.10 from chapter 2. I don't know. Yeah, I think it is. Think of a conflict you've observed or experienced, possibly one you thought about earlier in the chapter. First, determine whether any conflict metaphor applies to this conflict. You can think of a metaphor of your own or use one we've presented in the book. It's presented. If you stay in the current framework, what options are available to you for resolving the conflict? And basically what that means is think of a metaphor that you kind of are using now to kind of think of that conflict. And if you stay with that metaphor, what limitations is that providing you? For resolving the conflict. And what options is it providing you? List at least 3. And then it shows a different, more positive metaphor for framing the same conflict, and then listed 3 options that might be available if you envision the conflict in that way. Okay, so that's the pre-work. You're going to do the same thing that you did before. Again, I'm trying to have these videos in here so that we get to know each other's faces and voices, and also encourages people not to use AI. Are less likely to use AI if they have to do videos. And so 3 to 5 minute videos. And I think all of you know how to share those now that we did that this time. And then again, you're going to pick at least 3 of your classmates to respond back. You're going to try to tie in something from the readings. Now, the tie to the reading is going to be easy for this first part because you're actually using metaphors from the book. Okay, initially. So everybody's going to have it there. It's here that you're going to have to be thinking about what else have you read this week, or what else have have we covered in the URI reading also that might be tied to this. So that's what you're doing for this week. So are there any questions on that discussion post?
I did have one question about the workplace-based plan, and I noticed that in your approach, you got one question at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then are we supposed to talk to the AI and then get a response, or are we just supposed to ask it a couple of times to get some feedback? And then
Yeah.
once we do that, how do we upload that whole conversation? Are we supposed to upload that whole conversation into the post, or how
Yeah.
does
So, and Tony could tell how he did it in ChatGPT, but what I just did in Claude was it gave me the option to actually copy it or to upload it into a doc. So you can do it either way. And yes, I want to see your whole conversation. So I don't remember though in mine if it was the whole conversation. So let me just take a look and open that up. Yeah, see in mine, it only gave the final version. So you would also, thank you for asking that because I did not make that clear. So you would also need to go in and actually cut and paste this whole thing. Okay. And what I would do, okay, is I would just cut and paste it. And I don't know if you can, yeah, you can copy it right here. I don't know if ChatGPT's got a copy option, but you can copy it and then put it into a Google Doc or a Word doc or a PDF, something. Okay. So try to copy it. All right. And then you're going to include that with what you write. So when you turn that in, let's go back to the assignment. When you turn that in for this weekend, you may have, let me review the instructions, you may have several things that you attach. You can attach multiple files here, okay? Or you could put it all into one Google Doc, okay? But I need to make sure I can easily find this part as well, okay? This identify and explain why you chose the 5 you did to focus on your reflection through the semester. And that's not going to be in the AI part. So you're going to have to, you could either type that in as another doc, or you could type it in here and then just attach additional docs. Okay. So that's how I would do it. Tony?
Yeah, for the Chat GPT, it's just copy and paste, highlight what's in Chat GPT, and then Control C and then Control V on it over to a Word doc. One question or one thing, one comment I'd have about that: when you're working on the project, if you use Chat GPT, I'd recommend that you create like a project file, just so because there were some personal things that initially in the beginning I spoke with about Chat GPT, but I did make it clear that I don't want some of this personal stuff to end up in the conflict-based work project that we were working on, just so in case there were things like that in your conversation history, you're not having to kind of go back and forward for it to kind of separate that kind of stuff out.
So if you have a paid account or an account that you log into for ChatGPT, and you can start a new project that's got multiple files in it. So you can see that I've got multiple things that I've got projects on, and then I've just got individual documents. But when you open it up new, it's going to be your very first time that you've talked to it. Or you can open up a new project, right? Give a project name, and then you can put multiple things underneath it, okay? So there was something I was working on with my department chair at my department yesterday, and I was like, this something with our basic course, and I was like, there are multiple things that I have already told it about that basic course, so I wanted it to be a part of that continued conversation. But if you do that, then you can cut and paste only the part of the conversation that's related to it too.
That's what I wanted to clarify. If it was okay, if if you did see a break or something, it was because that was not related to the project and that
Yeah.
wouldn't cause, a hailstorm or anything like that. So I
At
just
this
want to
point,
thank
I
you for
think
clearing
people
that.
are experimenting with this and they're trying to be honest. So I'm going to think the best of you. It's if I start seeing reasons why I don't think you're being honest, that I might end up interviewing you and talking to you about your process before I would make any accusations. So. All right. Are we good for both the assignments that are due at the end of this week? Okay. All right, so let's talk briefly about kind of what you got out of the readings for this week. And so we had for last week we had the forward in chapter 1, right? And then the interpersonal conflict chapter 1 chapter. And because we only, you didn't have much chance to read before that, but I did ask you to read ahead to do chapter 2 in the possible book and then chapter 2 in the interpersonal conflict book. So has anybody been able to start doing the reading for week 2, to have started that? Okay, I see
I
Jeff
mean, yeah,
shaking
I've started
his
in
head.
it.
Yeah. So Jeff,
I've started in the
what's
reading.
one takeaway so far from either one of those readings that you're kind of thinking about mulling over?
Yeah, so I will say so far I'm actually liking the interpersonal communication book more than the Uri book right
Okay,
now.
that's good.
So far in the beginning. At least with chapter 2, in the beginning, it's kind of talking about more like perspectives and background, like almost from a psychological standpoint of childhood development and how that shapes your conflict, which was kind of interesting. But what, kind of with the quote wise and everything, when he's talking about conflict metaphors, that's when I said, okay, conflict analysis. How are people using metaphors in conflict? And then I started thinking, I use metaphors to try to explain my perspective to people. What am I saying? Almost taking it like a Freudian or
Yeah, yeah.
psychoanalysis type of thing to it. So I that kind of just had me set back, and I was like, metaphors. I never would have thought about how those are used in conflict. So
And the way they use it in the chapter is different than even how I use it whenever I'm doing like just a standalone workshop on conflict management. I tend to use metaphors in the sense of what's your personal metaphor for conflict in general? So basically, how is it that you kind of react towards conflict. I use the example sometimes of my husband and myself of is that when we first got married, I realized that he saw conflict like a messy closet. I mean, there was a closet in his apartment that he would never ever let me look into. We weren't living together. And so he's like, no, you can't even go there. And I'm like, why? And that makes you just want to look in it, right? And so I'm like, why not? He's like, well, that's just my storage place. He told me later that he just stuck everything in there when he would get ready to have company, because it was just like, and it was actually an extra bedroom. So it was ended up being kind of like this big closet bedroom, is, you know, and I ended up finding out later he was a big, loved to decorate for Christmas. So all of his Christmas decorations and other things were in there and stuff. That wouldn't have bothered me. But he didn't want me to see the mess. And so conflict's like a messy closet to him. So for him, he avoids it at all cost, right? For me, conflict's like an explosion. It feels like it is going to literally come out of my nostrils as much like a volcano would, and I got to have a release for it. So early on in our relationship, we had conflict over how we did conflict, because I got to get it released. I got to talk about it. You got to sit and listen to me. And he would be like totally stonewalling. And I was like, wait, you can't do that. I'm supposed to be a communication person, and you're working on communication, and why aren't we communicating well? And when we finally realized we had two separate conflict metaphors for even how we approach conflict, and then we began to talk about it, and his family grew up in a family that was I think I may have mentioned this in one of the videos, but in a family that in which there was his dad was an alcoholic. And so when his dad would come home after drinking, you didn't want to be in the brunt of it. I mean, that was not a pleasant place to be. So he would go to his room and just let his mom and his dad kind of, he could put his headphones on and let his mom and his dad just kind of fight it out, because he was little, and in order to manage, right? So we just avoid conflict, right? Well, for me and my family, I could let it out. Now, if I let it out in a certain way and I was disrespectful, I'd be sent to my room. But I let it out. So I was able to do that. And so we grew up in very different families, and we learned about norms, and we got to talk about that, went to counseling together, you know, to find out different ways of dealing with it. But that's how until I read this chapter for this class this week, that's how I had always seen metaphors being used, is in the sense of what's my personal metaphor for conflict, and then asking another person that I might be in relationship with, what's your personal metaphor for conflict, so that we can understand, oh, that's why it's difficult. That's why we're having conflict over having conflict. Ah, now I understand. And so I would do an exercise sometimes with conflict in conflict workshops, where I would ask people to fill in the blank to say, conflict is like this to me. I would ask them to think about it, how conflict makes them feel. In fact, you could do this yourself if you wanted to. Conflict makes me feel like this, makes me feel scared, makes me feel excited, makes me feel anxious, makes me feel like hyperventilating, makes me feel numb. And if you think about another time in which conflict makes you feel that way, then you could say conflict is like that. So I had a student one semester that said, conflict is like a plate of fish. And I was asking them to do this exercise as an undergraduate class. And she said, I said, a plate of fish? She said, yes, my boyfriend family cooks the fish with the head on it. And I like fish, but I can't stand seeing eyes look at me when I'm getting ready to eat it. So I said, so does it, I said, how does it make you feel? It makes me sick at my stomach. I said, oh, conflict makes you sick at your stomach. Okay. So just curiosity. Let's just try that real quick. For you, think about in general, with maybe a significant other or friend or family member, could be work, but somebody that you have conflict with quite a bit, or you have had a history of conflict with. How does it make you feel? Okay, so just kind of think about how it makes you feel. Okay, so in fact, just real quickly, put the words in the chat. How does it make you feel? Empty and scared to respond. Ooh, that's powerful imagery. Empowered then guilty. Oh, initially positive. Okay. Aggravated. All right. Defensive and aggressive. All right. Did we get everybody? 1, 2, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay. So think about another time that's not even a conflict situation that you also have felt that. So maybe you get defensive and aggressive when you're cut off in traffic. Or maybe you want to hit your head against a wall, Kat said, whenever you run out of gas. I mean, I don't even know if that's what to go. What other things make you want to hit your head against a wall? You're aggravated when you have to wait in line. Okay. You feel empowered, then guilty when you actually speak up for yourself, but then somebody criticizes you. You're empty and scared to respond when I don't know, Jeff, when you're going on a first date. Okay, I don't know. So think about another time, and what I want you to do is I want you to put what that other time is into the chat. Okay? Doesn't have to be what I said. What is that other time? It's not a conflict-related incident necessarily, but you feel also that same feeling in that incident. When my socks get wet during rainstorms, and that may have happened today, Tony. Okay. All right. So imagine, I'm just going to go through some of these. So imagine when your socks get wet during rainstorms. So Tony, for you, you get aggravated. So conflict is kind of like that for you. It's like I get and people can all of a sudden, yeah, when my socks get wet and I'm having to sit in my wet socks during my whole next meeting, and it's freezing because they have the air conditioning still turned on, even though it's 65 degrees outside. Okay, and that's how I'm feeling. And all of a sudden, the person who may not have ever understood why it is you deal with conflict the way you do can have empathy towards you about that metaphor. And so then the next time you're in conflict, they understand this is how you're feeling. All right. So Dr. I said, when people change plans without consideration for my plans, conflict is makes me feel like when people change plans without consideration for my plans. So, and that's frustrating. Okay. You thought you had plans and then it doesn't happen. It's like, oh gosh, why did they leave me out? All right. When I make a mistake with large consequences. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, you talked about feeling empty and scared to respond. It's like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't even show up tomorrow. Okay. When I hear scratches against the chalkboard. Conflict for me is like when I'm hearing scratches against the chalkboard. So I can imagine for Caitlin, if that's really true for her, if she would fill in the blank with conflict is like hearing scratches against the chalkboard, all of a sudden I know Caitlin will really want to run from conflict. It is painful. Okay? So, because it's painful for me to hear those scratches. Kat, conflict like asking a question for clarification, not getting the answer I need. So it's frustrating. It's like you thought you were asking a question and they just missed it completely. Okay. So that's how I've seen conflicts metaphors used before. It's more of that kind of trying to help the other person understand where I'm coming from and then building a little empathy towards our conflict styles and being able to talk about how we have conflict and then letting them do the same thing. Okay. But back to Tony's or Jeff's comment, in the book, it talks about how we frame a conflict at large, a general conflict. So I'm thinking of a conflict that I had with a faculty member. Not going to mention who it is. Okay. It's getting better, actually, a lot better. Okay, but if I would actually to describe that using a metaphor and go to the metaphors, now I've got the older version of the book because my newer version's in at home. Okay, is it warlike and violent? Not exactly. Is it bullying? Kind of. Is it a trial? Yeah, sometimes I feel like both parties feel like they're on trial. A heroic adventure? No, no, no. Conflict is never a heroic adventure for me. Bargaining table could be that. Musical improvisation or quilt making, garden? No, definitely not. Okay, but some of these are positive and some of these aren't. So if I was going to do the assignment for this week and I was going to pick that conflict setting, maybe I pick out as conflict is a trial, okay, which sounds kind of negative, and I show, okay, based on me looking at it that way, it's going to give me these options for next steps or these limitations for next steps. You could answer that question your way. Okay, so let's just pick a heroic adventure all of a sudden, or garden. Well, that changes it. What in the world would that if I reframe that conflict as a garden? Well, that would be helpful. What would that actually? Oh, well, there's weeds I got to pull. Yeah, I got to work at it always, but I'm planting something and it's pretty or it's going to feed me. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I have hope. It's possible. That's where changing the metaphor of a conflict in general leads you to that possibility approach of Uri. Okay. All right. Sorry, I went off kind of on a spin there, Jeff, with what you said. Anybody else read either one of those chapters to take away that you've kind of been mulling over and thinking about? Chapter 2.
I like the how it went in the interpersonal conflict about collectivism versus individualism, and then how it's kind of seen on a societal level. For the United States, we're more embracing of an individualistic culture where we all, to an extent, we're all equal to a large extent. And then when you look and flip it to how China kind of preview, or how it explains China does, they're more about avoidance and saving face among their social collective, and how those perspectives can greatly factor if when a conflict occurs. If you were, I mean, if I would love to work internationally, that's always a possibility how life unfolds. So, if I did something that generated a conflict or offended, I would have to, like for in China, there's going to be a ritual in order to address that. And I have to have the humility to say, even though I know or feel I am correct, my behavior in this situation was wrong, and now I must do the prescribed ritual. And it framed it in a way that I can better understand, discussing culturally how issues can be addressed. I mean, I grow up, my mother's from Cuba, so the way that her and her family approach conflicts was different than my father's, who's from, I mean, he's, born in the United States. So that clash was almost constant, and seeing it in life. And the cultural aspect of conflict is very interesting for me.
And I can imagine for anybody who's traveled overseas, Kat, with her military background too, that you really see that. But even within organizations, I had a conversation yesterday with a faculty member who told me that if he would have thought through the organizational culture of the place where he was working, he would have made different decisions, because the culture that he was putting forward as the new leader was not consistent with the culture of the organization. In a few weeks, we're going to do a conflict remix where you're going to actually use AI again, and you're going to take a conflict setting, a conflict situation, and you're going to actually ask it to think through what would happen if different variables were changed, like culture, so that you can be able to visualize that. And I thought about that when I was reading that part of the chapter in the interpersonal conflict book this week, and I'm like, Maybe I should have assigned that earlier on, but I already had the workplace thing, early on in the semester. So we'll refer back to that. So thank you for bringing that up. Even different families. There's some families that are we don't make a decision without everybody being on board. And there's others that are very competitive. It's a win-lose situation, and whoever has the strongest argument or has the most power wins. And that's individualistic versus collectivist also. So, anybody else? Something from either one of those chapters?
I basically where Yuri was talking about like how he ends the first paragraph starting from the possible. The path to possible starts from possible, and how he talks about his grandfather ignoring the obstacles and looking for the opportunities. So nothing is ever a closed door. You just have to look deeper into it to find a possible way. I mean, not a way out, but nothing's ever closed. That's what I took from that, and look at things from a different angle.
Yeah, a different angle. Third party or third view is what he's going to be talking about, that balcony kind of perspective, right? And it does make a difference if we can, and that's why the metaphor of the conflict in general is so powerful, to be able to change that metaphor, because it gives you a different perspective. I have a faculty member right now, Caitlin actually knows, Kristen, Dr. McIntyre serves for me as a third side. She almost always, I'll go and I'll say, I'm frustrated about this. It could be a policy at the university. It could be something that's happened with a student, or it could be, something that's gone on with another faculty member. And she'll sit there, and Caitlin knows her, she'll sit there and she'll be like, well, I wonder if this could have been going on for them. Now, Caitlin, I don't know if she does that with you guys, with your staff or not, but she does that with me a lot, because I tend to be a hothead, right? I'm an exploder. And so I'm like, well, it's just like, well, and so we all have people in our lives that can also kind of do that for us, right? So that kind of reframing. And so his grandfather was like that for him. Yeah. Speaking of Yuri, I'm going to show a 5-minute clip just to kind of make you want to watch and I'm going to talk about the victory speech a little bit, to make you want to watch that transform. Oh, well, I guess they thought I was having a victory speech or something. There were the, whatever. I don't know sometimes why it gives certain things, but anyway, so I'm going to pull up a little bit of this transforming. It's in the assignment for this week. So under weekly materials, so under week 2, it's got that transforming conflict in 3 steps. I'll just show you where I'm looking so you can see it if you want to watch the whole thing. But the week 2 note-taking handout, and I'm kind of going in and out of the note-taking handout a little bit, but this transforming conflict in 3 steps is the video that I'm picking from. It's when I'm watching it, it's 25 minutes long. I'm going to show you a 5-minute clip. So only kind of in the middle of a sentence. So let me stop sharing and make sure I got it where I'm sharing the sound. Let me see if I can share a portion of my screen so you don't get distracted by all of the videos on the side. All right, so how long am I sharing for this? Let me just look, 12:51. I think I've got it up right, 17:43. Okay, so let's listen to this and just see how he talks a little bit more about that kind of possible perspective with those 3 steps that we referenced last week.
Your mind is right here, and in a conflict, their mind may be way over here. And we're here in our position, and we're saying, hey, come over to my, you got to get over to my position. You got to take my position. But if you go and put yourself in their shoes for a moment, and that's one of the critical things in building a bridge, is that act of being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, understand how they see the situation. It's not so easy for them to move over to your position, because for them it's like there's a giant chasm like the Grand Canyon filled with dissatisfaction, unmet needs. Well, I'll look like a failure. I'll look weak. It won't meet my needs. There's any number of reasons why they can't adopt your position. And so what this requires us to do for a moment, something not always easy, is to leave where our mind is for right now. Leave where our mind is and start the conversation where they are, where their mind is, where their heart is, where they are. Connect with them, listen to them. That's why listening is so key to this. And then think about, how do you build a bridge over that chasm to help them move in the direction you'd like them to move? Because oftentimes in conflict, subtly, it's like, how do I make it harder for the other side? No, your job in conflict is to make it easier for the other side, to make it easier for them to move in the direction you want them to move. So let me go back to Abilio for a moment. So then the question was, okay, got this conflict, he wants freedom, how do we begin to build a bridge? Well, first was, how do we make contact with the other side? Because they weren't talking with each other. And his business partner. And I couldn't get a hold of the business partner because, the whole thing. But I was able to get a hold of a friend of the business partner, a mentor of the business partner, who was a French banker who lived in Paris. And he said, okay, you want to come see me? You can have lunch with me in Paris. And he named a date. So I showed up in Paris, went to lunch with him, and he asked me, so why are you here? And he kind of suspicious. And I said, well, I'll tell you why I'm here. I'm here because life is too short. Parce que la vie est trop courte. Because life is too short. It's too short for these gigantic battles where everybody ends up losing. Not only the parties, but their families, all the employees of the company, the shareholders, the whole society. Everyone's suffering because of this conflict. He said, yeah, but how would you, and I think he was taken aback by that, because what I was trying to do was see if we could kind of create a bridge. How could we together help our friends, our clients, help them out of this conflict, help them through this conflict? He said, well, how would you approach it? I said, well, if we could just agree on two things, I think maybe we could make some progress. He said, what are those? And I said, both parties, they want their freedom. They want their freedom to go on with their lives. They want their freedom to do what they want. And they also have dignity. Neither of them can afford to lose. As things gone so public, they can't afford to be seen to lose in this sense. If we could just base an agreement on those two principles, those two interests, which they both share, freedom and dignity. And what's interesting about when you get down to that level, at the level of where the negotiation was, there's a lot of either or. It's either more for me means less for you, but more freedom for one doesn't necessarily mean less freedom for the other. You could have more freedom for both. More dignity for one person doesn't necessarily mean less dignity for the other. You can have more dignity for both. They're positive sum. So he said, well, why don't you come to my office the next day and let's talk about it. And in an hour in his office the next day, which was a Tuesday, we sketched out what would it mean to apply freedom and dignity to this particular business dispute. That was Tuesday. By Friday, we had both parties sitting at a law office in Sao Paulo, signing off an agreement, putting an end to a 2.5-year dispute that was widely expected to go on for another 7 years, wishing each other well, made a joint speech to the executives of the company, and the dispute was over. And I asked Abilio that night, I said, how do you feel? He said, well, I got everything I wanted. He said, but the most important thing is I got my life back. And I asked the other side too, and they were happy. And not only were they happy, obviously the families were happy, the community was happy. So it was not just a win-win, it was a win-win with a third win for the larger community around them. That was the bridge. And that's the key, is it took going to the balcony to try to build that bridge, but there was a third element that was also necessary, which is what I call the third side.
Yeah, I'm going to stop it there. You can watch the rest. And a lot of the video is very similar to what we saw last week, so it's going to sound a lot similar, but sometimes, to me, some of his concepts are a little bit hard to figure out how do you implement. And so the more you hear it, the more examples that you hear, I think it's easier to see. I did look up one of the, and this is in your handout, and I found a resource guide that he uses when he's trying to create a victory speech. And so I'm going to pull up the handout from tonight, from week 2. And again, just to remind yourself, the week 2 note-taking handout, that's what I'm pulling up here. He basically, originally, if and we're going to do a little bit of this tonight, but not a lot, because I'm exhausted and I don't want us to keep it too late. But we didn't have breakout rooms at the beginning because I had forgotten to do that. Okay. So I'll talk about how we can do this in a minute. But basically what he said and what I identified is there's basically 4 steps here that you could use to create a victory speech. And the first one is to identify their interest or needs by asking specific questions. Now, he talks about a strategic empathy guide and a key actor profile. So I've linked both of those out in documents that you can get to that are open for viewing. But it's basically, what do the people want or need? What are they most concerned about? What do they fear? What can they live with? What else do I need to know about where they're coming from? And I will just tell you, if you read some of his other things, Yuri's other work, this is preparatory work for any conflict that you're in. Before you ever have a sit-down conversation with them, you answer these questions for yourself, but you also answer them for the other person or the other people, so that when we're actually trying to negotiate or come up with a decision that both parties can live with, or that we can work through, we are trying to meet all the needs. And that's really what I was talking about, this win-win and then win for the community kind of situation. So these are some questions that you can ask. So identify their interest, identify their needs. What's their bottom line that they want? Then he also talks about listing their key points, as a victory speech, as a single word or a short phrase, thinking of what they would say if they got what they needed, and try to come up with at least 3 points. Now, you can do that for yourself as well if you want, but what is it that they really need? So I think about an ongoing conflict that I have had with I'll rather than using the professional one, I'll use the personal one. So my husband and I always conflict over money. Anybody else have a relationship with which money is a big issue? I'm a spender. He's a saver. Okay. I actually make more money than he does, but I try not to bring that up because that will be just like a below the belt kind of comment, right? I'm like, why can't I spend the money on what I want to spend it on? Anyway, so when the credit card bill comes in that we pay off every month, we put a whole bunch of stuff on the credit card just because it's easier to pay one bill. Okay. So, and the Amazon in particular comes in, and I have a love-hate relationship or love relationship with my Amazon delivery driver, whoever it is, because they come off all the time. I'm playing. Anyway, you guys are supposed to laugh, but okay. So when I think about this, I'll stop sharing so I can see your faces better. But when I think about what would he need to know that I really understand where he's coming from? I think he would probably like to have us budget. I can't stand budgeting because I do creative budgeting. Early on in our marriage, I took the clothing budget when it was finished and blown, and I used the convention budget because the clothes were needed for me to go to convention. And he said, you can't do that. I'm like, yes, I can. It's like there. It's what it's needed. No, that's for registration for the conference. And I'm like, for airfare. I'm like, yes. And anyway, so we just have disagreement about those kinds of things. And so I know if I can get to the credit card bill before he does, I can help it be less problematic. If I'm concerned about it the same way. But if he sees it first, anyway, it's just not necessarily a good thing. So, what would he need? I mean, what would he really want? He would want me to spend less, spend nothing, probably hardly. He would want me to and we've talked about, if you spend over $100 or over $200, then, we have to decide together as a couple, and we've kind of talked these through. We've talked about how our family spent money and how his family ended up being really short on money all the time. And so he had a fear of scarcity. And how my family spent money in different ways. And so we understand each other a lot better. But what would it be? What would be that single word or short phrase? I think for him, it would be April thinks my point is valid. I don't think it's necessarily as much about how much I spend or don't spend as much as that I don't put him down for his opinion. Now, if I can think about what are the key words, that single short phrase that he would say, wow, I'm heard. All of a sudden, I also have an opening to, I could do that. I can do that. But until I think about what does he really bottom line need and maybe put that into a single word or short phrase, maybe I'm not even concerned about that because I think he's being unreasonable. So it's just a different perspective. So anyway, and then he goes on and he says, and he actually has a victory speech guide to ask multiple questions, such as the following from the victory speech guide. What are the specific things that need to be addressed? What promises need to be made? What questions would they need to answer about the solution from people on their side? Now, he's usually talking about community conflicts, and so that's why it's their side. And then you basically do the same thing for yourself and your side. And then you see if there's any commonalities between you. And there might be, when he was talking about with that example with that international conflict, but in the workplace, they both wanted freedom and dignity. They both had that in common. So the bottom line when you see here is that, and from the 2 chapters for this week, is we need to look at a conflict situation not just through one lens and perspective. We need broader perspectives on the situation and consider the thoughts and needs of others. All right. So before we finish tonight, I'm going to actually ask you to go into breakout rooms. Okay. And I'm going to have one group of 2 and one group of 3. And what I would like for you to do is have one person, and we don't have everybody do this, share. This is how I was going to originally start this. This is the way it's worded in this version of the book. It's application 2.1. Think of a disturbing conflict that you've experienced in the past half year or so. Okay, and so I want you to think about this in terms of, it could be a disturbing conflict you observed. It could be one that you participated in. Could be one that one of your best friends told you about. Okay, so a disturbing conflict that you've experienced. Okay, and instead of that's the frame, right? Instead of doing the rest of the application, I want you to think about let's just say 2 parties that were involved in that. What was the needs of both sides? What were their bottom lines? What would they, if they could look ahead and really ask for a solution that met their needs, what might it look like? Okay, and I want you to brainstorm that with the other people in your group. So only one person is going to share a conflict unless you have time in this amount of time that I'm going to give you. Okay, and you're going to try to come up with, kind of go through this victory speech part of this handout, right? So what do you think that both parties are wanting and needing? What do they fear? What are they most concerned about? You might or might not be able to come up with a single word or short phrase about what it is that they would need to be able to say in a victory speech. And then, do the same thing with the other side. Okay. And you may or may not be the sides. You may not be the ones portrayed, but be thinking about that. I think about in the political realm right now, Republicans and Democrats in particular. And I know that's a big group of people, and it's hard to manage dealing with a conflict when you don't have specific people. But think about the last time you got into a political argument that didn't go well. And what were the needs for both parties to really, what was it that was going on? So I'm doing this twofold. Is one is I want you to kind of just not have me talking at you the whole time, but also for you to be thinking, and then just kind of be framing what would it look like to look through a conflict situation through multiple perspectives. So any questions before I put you into breakout rooms? All right, let's see what it gives me if I assign you guys automatically here. And if you don't know each other, then you can, end up introducing yourself to the other person too. So you kind of get to know the other person as well. And I'm going to give you about 8 minutes for this. Okay. If I can figure out how to do this, 8 minutes. So just one, let's do 10. So one of you share a conflict and the other person and that person or persons figure out, okay, what are the perspectives of both parties? What might a victory speech look like if you could somehow address the key underlying issues? Are there any commonalities that they have together that you could address? So questions, you guys good?
No, yeah, I've got one.
Yeah.
So hypothetical conflict or actual conflict,
I would
so
like
that
for
it can
something that
be
you actually have seen or heard about or experienced.
okay.
So it
Okay,
might
I
be
was
something you
just
heard about on the news, right? I mean, it wouldn't necessarily have to be personal.
all righty.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna open up the rooms. All right, I'm gonna pause the recording. For those of you who are out there listening to the recording, though, if you have any questions about the assignment, please let me know. As I break, if I ever do these breakout kind of rooms, be thinking about your own kind of conflict as well. Where might you see there be multiple sides in your own experiences, and what would those sides look like? And how could you conceptualize them and be able to talk about them? So I'm going to pause the recording just so that you aren't sitting here just looking at my face, and then we'll start it back when they come back. All right. Caitlin and Doc Rice, did you guys met before?
Yeah, we have.
Oh,
And
good. Okay.
I know we took Dr. Miracle's class together last semester.
Oh, that was the gauntlet of hardness, right?
Yep, that weekend class.
Yeah. All right. I've never taught a weekend class, but I know it can be difficult. All right. So let's just kind of in general. So, Caitlin and Doc Rice, what was the kind of situation that you dealt with?
I'll go. I'm dealing with a situation where I'm in conflict with a community member, uh, based on my role on the school board. And during the last school board meeting, it was a shouting match, and I eventually had to put her out the meeting. And so what I recognize is that, this person wants conflict, wants public conflict, and I'm just trying to maintain my professionalism, because I know that's what she feeds on. And so, but looking at the points, what I want to do is to evolve and not feed the conflict. Because if you want that, I can give you that. But then now, from my professional standpoint, it doesn't make me look good. And so I try to have compassion and empathy for her. I know what she wants. She wants a voice. She wants to be heard. She's upset she's not on the board, and I am. And so now that I recognize those things, I'm gonna be mindful of that in the future. So hopefully next board meeting, we have a little bit more peace. But if I don't engage, then she won't have anybody to engage with.
Caitlin, any ideas? Do you think it would be helpful for Doc Rice to go and act? And do you want me to call you Doc Rice? Or you want me to call you something else?
Doc Rice is fine. Yeah, Doc Rice, DOC
Doc
is
Rice.
fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So would it be helpful to have an individual conversation away from the school board with this person without anybody else present?
Hmm, I think so. So I feel like I'm always kind of on the side of like um conversation just because it gives you a chance to like at the very least ask questions about like not this nothing doesn't even want to say this, but like, hey girl, what's the problem with me? Something like that. Um, I feel like having at least having the chance to ask questions like, so like, do we have a problem or you don't want to say it like that.
Well, and it's hard. I mean, the way that you would have to do it is to come at it as a learning conversation. And I'm not saying that you should do that. I don't know the situation. I don't even know if it's appropriate to have that kind of conversation outside of the school board meeting. But as long as she wants attention or the public display and to get attention and needs the voice, but it's almost like you're the enemy, public enemy number one, and she is like this poor little me. Okay. So if we don't get to the point where we have a relationship and we see we have other things in common beyond this issue, that we can have a relationship beyond the current relationship, then that could be the only thing that ever happens with you and that person. So that's the only reason I was suggesting that. I don't know that I could do it personally, but it might be something to consider. I remember when my dean said to me, when I was telling him I was having a conflict with this faculty member, and it said, rather than having a sit down conversation, why don't you ask if you can go for a walk with them, or play basketball with. I mean, in some cases, you wouldn't play basketball with her probably, but I don't know. But go for a walk with them. I mean, something that it's like they're not calling. I'm not calling you to my office. You're not in trouble. It's like I don't like the way that our interactions have been going, and I want to learn. I want to learn about you, what's going on for you, and it might not be that you even get a chance to share about yourself, but at least she knows you're hearing her, and you can reflect back what you're hearing. We talk about a lot in the Braver Angels literature. Braver Angels is this nonprofit that I volunteer with that teaches people how to talk across the political divide. And they talk about the LAP skills. LAP is named after actually one of the persons who started the organization, David Lapp. But listening, so this whole idea of I'm coming at it from a position of humility and learning, right? Listening. But in that second step is an A, and then the A is so many things you can do. Jeff may remember this from listening in civil dialogue when we did that class together. But you can acknowledge what they say, acknowledge their feelings, not agreeing. You don't have to. You can thank them, appreciate them for taking the time to share that with you. You can maybe agree that it's a difficult issue. So there's a lot of A's there that can just show that you are just there respecting and having dignity in your presence. So it's away from that kind of situation. Then you go to the two P's, and the first P is pivot, which is where if you want, if there's a chance, you can ask for permission to share your perspective. Well, I have a little different perspective on this. Do you have time for me to share that as well? And they may say no, and they may say, no, I'm not interested in that at all, because you've already shared that. Okay, well, thank you. I so appreciate you taking the time for me just to hear you. And, the next time then you see them out at a, local function or at the coffee shop, it's like, hey, you can say hello to them. It's like this kind of it's not just about the roles that you're playing in the one situation, which is where this intractable kind of conflict is happening. Anyway, I don't know. I wasn't here to try to solve your conflict situation, but anyway, I tend to do that. I'm a problem solver, so you didn't ask me to do that, but okay, that's enough said. Tony, Kat, Jeff, who shared a conflict? What was the conflict kind of about?
I can give the background on it. It was actually my conflict. Okay.
Okay.
So I mentioned basically briefly that my brother and I had a conflict where with Fairway Lawns essentially. So I pay for Fairway Lawns to come out here, take care of the lawn, service it, and things like that. So he had came in and he had basically mentioned that he wanted us to cancel the service, and I didn't really understand why. I mean, I said I was taking responsibility for the service. I was paying for it. It was gonna, take care of the weeds, so we don't have to worry about the HOA. And then, he mentioned about them slamming the gate. So, and he works as a sleep tech, so he works 12-hour shifts overnight. And I understood that, but I didn't connect it. So I was saying we can fix the fence. That's not a problem. We can do that. I'm paying for it. I'm still trying to take responsibility. Like, we need this service. I'll take care of it. But he just kind of kept pushing, like, oh, just cancel it. Just cancel it. And that was kind of like a stonewalling part of it. But yeah, that's the brief scenario.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
did you guys, were you able to get through and talk a little bit about the needs of both parties and kind of what the underlying, really what they really want?
Mm,
Is it just about the fairway or is it about sleep?
yeah, yeah. And Tony, Kat, both opened up my eyes there. But yeah, if you guys want to go into it.
Yeah, so I, started with asking Jeff, have you ever worked overnight? And, I have, so I know the kind of soul-sucking work that it is and the aggravation that can come when somebody's waking you up after you've just worked a 12-hour shift overnight and you really need to get some sleep. And we kind of went and unpacked, started with, is it a money problem? Is it something he's concerned with, like in a budgetary reason that they shouldn't do it? And then I think we also ended up getting to, I think Kat went with a respect issue that he may probably have gone out there and talked to him, and they did not respect the wish and they kept on doing it. And can't really remember what else if we had another one in there, Kat.
I think not the needs of his brother's side, but Jeff's side from seeing it, like they need that service because the HOA, um, depending on what your HOA is, could be a nightmare if your lawn doesn't look up to their code. They could take your house away, they could fine you, it could spiral. So, I see where we've kind of put where Jeff was coming from and where his brother was coming from and looking at both needs.
Yeah. So eventually, I mean, we only had 10 minutes, right? Eventually, if you were going to try to create a victory speech for both parties, right? And I don't know what you all ended up deciding to do, and certainly don't know what's going to happen with Doc Rice and this woman who has the need to be heard in this particular way in a public setting. But if we can figure out what the bottom line is, if they were to perceive that they won, and you were to perceive that you won, both parties, what would you be getting? Well, and I don't know, you don't have to answer that, but that's the kind of thing that you have to think about when you're thinking about the victory speech. So thank you for spending some time together. And I know we haven't had a break, but I'm really trying to push through to get done a little early. So I'm going to say one other thing that I want to draw your attention to, and this is at the top of page 2 of your handout. So I'm going to share my screen. The book, the interpersonal conflict book, and I know we've been kind of focused more on that. I agree with actually with Tony. I think this time I like that book better in terms of the chapter. It was a little bit less dense this week than the first week was. I don't remember who it was. It was Jeff or Tony one that said I think they liked that book better. But they do talk about this concept of attributions. Now you probably have been in other classes where they've talked about attribution theory. It's an old theory that was developed in 1958 by Fritz Heider. You don't need to know that, but in psychology, in which it was trying to explain how it is that we create explanations for other people's behaviors and our own behaviors. And there are typical errors or biases that come into play when we are dealing with this. And so I'm going to just define each one of these. You can look them up online if you want. The book did not define these two, but it did talk about them kind of in general. The fundamental attribution error is where we tend to, for people that are different than us, we tend to ascribe their or explain their behavior using personality characteristics. And I think about this, Dr. Rice, with yours, right? So personality, she's just like that. She's just like that. Okay. Well, that's what we tend to do, right? That she just wants attention. Okay. And that may very well be true. Okay. All right. But what happens is that we don't always provide that personality characteristic to ourselves. And so the self-serving bias is when we think about, okay, we say other people's bad behavior and their negative behavior is because of their personality. It's because of something inside of them. But for ourselves, if it's a bad behavior, it's actually because of external circumstances. It's not our fault. It's because we're just being pushed against the wall. It's because, you know, they're being unreasonable, but we are taking care of the family. You know, we have this HOA policy. Okay. And so you can look it up if you want to see more information. Just do a Google search for fundamental attribution error and self-serving bias. There's no test in here in this class for you to have to remember this. But when you're looking at the part of the chapter that talks about identifying your filters, it does talk about attributions. And it's kind of another area that I'd like for you to kind of spend a little bit of time with as you're thinking about the chapter. So, all right, I'm ready to go home. How about the rest of you? Maybe you're home. All right, any other questions for me?
No, thank you for class today.
All right, well, thank you all for
Yeah.
coming. It's always much more enjoyable than me speaking to a camera by myself. So, all right, you
Thank
all,
you. It was fun.
have fun with the assignment for the weekends, 2 assignments. And if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Take care.